don't have a home on it, but on a cliff just south of Manistee, and I have lost a lot of bluff. Nobody has to explain to me what has happened in the last 2 years, particularly this year, because I've lost like everybody else. It's actually huge in my neighbors all around me. It's pretty scary, it's pretty horrifying. And we've got a lot of work to do together on this. And there really, I wish it was an easy solution. You know, I wish we could just say we're gonna, you know, build some barriers or something. This isn't going to be that easy. It's going to take doing everything we can short term to support people, and then also look at the reality of what is happening in the long run. And the reality is that after 100 years of carbon pollution going into the atmosphere, we're now fully faced with what that means when the atmosphere has been changed in terms of warming, precipitation, more extremes in the weather, and so on. And in Michigan, you know, nobody's seen that more than our farmers, and now I can say nobody's seen it more than everybody who's got property along our beautiful lakes, as well as our cities and counties and all of the public infrastructure and the national and state parks and so on. I mean, we're seeing all of it. So we have to deal with, what do we do now? What can the state be doing? What can the federal government be doing? And then we've got to be, I think, very robustly, and I am leading bipartisan efforts. I'm part of a bipartisan group called the Climate Solutions Caucus, and have the only bipartisan climate bill that's actually moving in the United States Senate to work with our farmers to be able to keep more carbon in our soils on the land rather than runoff into the water, which creates a lot of problems in terms of resiliency along our shorelines and so on. And we're actually moving forward, and our farmers in Michigan are very excited about this in terms of what can be done, and can be done faster than people think. But it's not the immediate. So let's talk about one of the things immediately. One of the things that I think is very important as a practical matter is that we have to get more resources into the state of Michigan and local communities that have been using resources to tackle this health pandemic. We've seen a whole lot of funding shift. All the demands, we all know what they are on local government, state government, and so on, to keep people safe, to deal with protecting people's lives, to deal with all of the other public services involved. And it's left a big hole in funding, which is why what we're trying to get done right now federally to bring more money directly to communities as well as to the state would put the state in a position, and communities, to at least have some more dollars and flexibility to address this crisis. At the state level, I know there's been a lot of debate about the state declaring a state emergency, which is fine. It would make me feel better as a property owner. It doesn't do anything if there's not funding. Same thing federally. We need to get a federal designation that would unlock money. The point is not to just say, oh, this is awful. The point is, how do you unlock funding through FEMA and the Army Corps and so on? And so we need to have dollars coming in that will backfill what has been lost or spent, rightly so, on the pandemic, the monies that's been given now to schools to figure out how to reopen safely, all of those costs. And it has put the state as well as communities in a very difficult situation. So we've got to get some more dollars there as well. The other thing, back in February, some of you were with me, but I did a tour in 3 different places in Michigan, up in Alpena on Lake Huron, and then in the Bay Area, Saginaw Bay Area, and then down in South Haven, bringing together the state, bringing Eagle and FEMA and the Army Corps to look at what could be done right now with the resources that are there, and what did we need to change to unlock more federal dollars. And so we did do some things. I'm glad that we were able to free up some both technical assistance and other focus and some help on resources. Again, short term, you know, it's so how do you mitigate this right now? But we did get the conversation going. We did get the coordination going, which I think was really important. And one of the things that we really focused on is the fact that when we look at FEMA, they do disasters, but they define a disaster as one big event. The hurricane goes through, tornado goes through, you know, huge flooding. It's not what we're saying, which is over time, the erosion. Now it's hitting us, you know, this year particularly, but last year in a big way. But FEMA's programs weren't set up to deal with this. And so Senator Peters and I, and I'm really glad Senator Peters is the lead Democrat on the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. And so his committee passed something called the STORM Act, which I'm a co-sponsor of, that would for the first time set up a state revolving fund to provide grants. This is significant, not just loans, but grants to states to reduce disasters like erosion. So for the first time, it would be something that's a specific designated pot of dollars. And so this actually came out of Homeland Security Committee, I think maybe in March, but has not been acted on the floor of the US Senate. So we would love it to have everybody on this call lean in and ask for support. It came out bipartisan support out of committee. There's just no reason we can't get this passed and then move it through the House to set up a specific fund. So we're not debating with FEMA all the time about what an emergency is, what a disaster looks like, which is what is happening now. They're limited in what they can do. So a state revolving loan or grant fund to specifically focus on our needs on erosion is really important. And the STORM Act is an important way to get that going. There's no reason that we couldn't get that done. If we can get it, basically Senator McConnell, as the leader of the Senate, determines what is brought up for a vote. We need him to make this a priority to bring it up for a vote and then push it through the House of Representatives. The other thing I mentioned to you was the Farm Bill, which may not make sense. You may say, well, what does that have to do with erosion? But the 5-year Farm Bill that I've led in the last 2 bills, we greatly increased land and water conservation and efforts to actually stop runoff, stop erosion, work with farmers on what we need to do to manage land differently. And what they're excited about is put in place programs that need to be extended so that we can actually create a way for farmers to make bring in revenue by quantifying the carbon that they keep in the ground that's not polluting the air. And there's a way to do that, and we're in the process of doing that right now. But what the Farm Bill does is really important. The other things I would say is there are 2 other programs, one in Army Corps, one in FEMA, that we need to get more robust dollars in, that we're working on in the appropriations process this year. Appropriations dollars don't get done till the fall. So again, not immediate, but important to get those dollars in. And there's something, again, that's longer term, but really important for us. Senator Portman and I passed into law the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. We need to lay out the plan for all of us on what needs to be happening in terms of flooding and erosion, a plan for communities, the infrastructure along the lakes, and have a plan in place for what needs to be done, and be able to determine the funding for that. We've passed the requirement to have this resiliency study. I was very disappointed that it was not put in the Army Corps budget the last 2 years now. We've been trying to get funding to get this done so that we would be able to have a clear vision on what we need to do to be able to plan long-term for all of this. And finally, let me just say that I am really glad that Eagle has, with all of your advocacy, effective advocacy, is actually approving the permits more quickly. I was just looking at the numbers. About a third of them are now approved in 7 days, which is good. 59% in 30 days. I know we want to continue to make that as fast as possible, but all of you and your voices really made that happen. And so congratulations for doing that. And I was glad to do a part of bringing everybody together in the beginning to have the conversation. I will end a couple of positive notes. One sort of another piece we're trying to get done. There is something called the highway bill, Senate highway bill, that is passed every number of years, and we've been able to get a first of a kind large investment again in infrastructure, resilient infrastructure. I mean, how do we deal with both public-private infrastructure in this world we are in right now with all of the weather events and what is happening? And we are certainly seeing that. And again, this is a transportation bill that came out of the Senate back in March. It's bipartisan. We are waiting for it to be taken up on the floor. And for the first time, it would deal with road infrastructure, other infrastructure that need to be resilient because of what's happening on the weather. And that's going to be a very common buzzword now for us moving forward. What is resiliency in the middle of all of this? The University of Toledo report, Ron flagged for me, talked about the Great Lakes parks and what's happening, the incredible damage in our parks and the road infrastructure, parks infrastructure. We're now seeing it as well in our federal parks, where we're seeing erosion in Sleeping Bear Dunes and Pictured Rocks and all over Michigan in our beautiful federal parks as well. But that brings me to the good news. We have been able to get something called the Great American Outdoors Act passed into law recently, that not only permanently funds the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but would provide significant dollars to deal with all the backlog and dealing with our parks and the needs, the infrastructure needs of our national parks. And this is going to give us significant resources to address at least what is happening in our national parks. So a lot to do. I wish I could say, let's do this one thing and it's going to fix it. I really wish that were the case. We all know that is not the case, but we need to make sure the permitting process is flexible and moving quickly, that resources are available through the state, even in the midst of all the dramatic needs on this health pandemic and the economic challenges we have. And then federally, changing the way FEMA and the Army Corps looks at these issues as, in fact, disasters, which they are. And so I'm working on every level we can. Our Great Lakes Coalition in the Senate does great work together, and we're pushing on every angle. And Ron, want to continue to work with all of you on every possible thing. I should also mention, I know issues around water, what's happening, water diversions and so on are being discussed. I certainly want to hear more about that. I think that's complicated, but certainly whatever works is what I'm going to support and lean in on to get done for us.
Okay, thank you, Debbie, very much. Please stay around. We'll have some questions for you at the end. Rod, we're going to be going to you next. But beforehand, I want to make sure that everybody understands we're going to be taking questions at the end, but you can chat and enter your questions in the chat box at the lower portion of your screen. So,
Ron, I'm going to interrupt only just one quick second, because I had been told that I would be able to answer any questions for me now, and the only reason I say that is that unfortunately I will not be able to stay until the end. I wish I could stay for all the presenters, but I would be more than happy to address any questions folks have for me right now. That's what I had been told would be happening, and unfortunately scheduled. Some other things were scheduled, given the thinking that was what was happening.
Debbie, we have one question for you at this point. How are you managing to work with the Canadian government to help expedite or deal with the Great Lakes water levels? With Montreal not being so supportive of water discharging down there.
Right.
How are you managing that to get some more cooperation?
Well, in general, I've had very, very good communication. In fact, when you're talking about Lake Huron on the nuclear waste site, I've actually been very involved in leaning in on that particular issue on waste being along Lake Huron, and feel like I've been able to make an impact there, and having them take another look at what they're doing and so on. And we have done this over several years, actually, with different proposals. From my perspective, I want to make sure we're all working together on what it is exactly that we want to have happen. And then, because there's a lot of implications that we know that there's hydropower issues with Canada. There's a whole range of things, and I want to make sure that when I lean in, it's on the strategy that is the best for us. And so I've had general conversations, but there's been there's not a clear agreement yet. And so that's what I need to see and understand, and make sure that the implications, because not just on the Lake Huron side, there's been various debates about Chicago waterways. There have been various, as you know, suggestions, and we need to know what the impacts are on us as you start doing that. And so I'm looking forward to working with you on that.
Great. Are there any other questions that people want to add? Please type them in. Oh, I guess there's none. You're lucky, Debbie. Thank you very much, Debbie.
Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Take care. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Bye now. I'll be in touch.
Great.
Okay, Rob. Okay, Rob.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ron, for having me. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Senator Stabenow, and I know State Senator Lasada is online too. So hello, Kim. Nice to virtually see you again too. I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint presentation. I know Ron has it posted and available to you. So I will. Some of the screens will be very detailed, and I will try my hardest not to read them to you, and you'll have time afterwards at your leisure to review them, and if questions don't get answered today, please get them to me through Ron or directly to me. Okay, Ron, if you could let me know if my screen's up.
It's up and ready.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm Rob Sisson. I'm a commissioner on the International Joint Commission. Some of you might know or might remember that I'm a native of Sturgis, Michigan, where I served on the city commission and as mayor for quite a while. Southwest Michigan is my home, and I have great memories and look forward to many more opportunities to spend time along Lake Michigan's beautiful coast. Obviously today I want to kind of provide some background on what IJC's role is, what determines water levels, focus a little bit on the Lake Superior outflows because that is, I think, of utmost interest to you, given that Lake Michigan and Lake Huron are considered one body of water, and that's where this water from Lake Superior flows to. And then discuss briefly some other measures that could reduce coastal impacts. So the IJC is a binational body. It's established by the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. 3 commissioners are appointed by the president on the advice of the Senate, and I'm one of those 3. And 3 are appointed by the cabinet in Canada. We try to make our decisions based on consensus that finds solutions or recommendations that are in the best interest of both nations. We have offices in Ottawa, in Washington, D.C., and our Windsor, Ontario office supports our work under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. The IJC acts as an independent advisor to the governments of Canada and the United States to help them meet the treaty obligations. For example, if either country wants to build a dam that affects the natural levels and flows of boundary waters, the IJC is one mechanism the governments can use to seek binational approval. The IJC examines how the project would affect interest on in both countries and holds public hearings to get public input. If the IJC approves the project, it issues an order of approval with conditions that must be followed in the operation of the project, which the governments then can accept or reject or send back to us for modifications. The governments also don't have to use the IJC for any of these matters that may fall under our purview. They have other methods and opportunities to reach decisions or institute policy outside the IJC. Oftentimes, the governments will refer issues to the IJC for investigation and report. They will send a letter to us. It's called a reference, asking us to address specific questions. We then usually appoint a binational study board made up of experts. On the US side, that would be engineers from the Army Corps, weather experts or hydrology experts from NOAA, maybe Coast Guard people, state agency people, even some more of an emphasis in recent times for Indigenous people who can bring Indigenous knowledge, thousands of years of knowledge passed on through their tribe or First Nation. So the process generally results in well-founded recommendations, but at the end of the day, our recommendations are non-binding and the governments decide whether or not to follow them. The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River form a huge interconnected system. Lake Superior is the largest body of fresh water in the world by surface area. Lakes Michigan and Huron, as I mentioned earlier, function as one hydrologically single lake, which even has a larger surface area than Lake Superior. During the past 2 years, all of the Great Lakes have set record high water levels, resulting in widespread suffering on each of the lakes in the St. Lawrence River. So the water level fluctuations depend on the weather, which is highly variable and difficult to accurately predict. Lake levels follow a seasonal cycle that is driven by hydrologic conditions. And our engineers and scientists continually monitor these conditions. During cold winter months, snowfall accumulates on the land surface. Then as the temperatures warm, rain falls and the snowpack melts. This obviously increases inflow to the Great Lakes and water levels rise as a result. I think many of you probably saw the MLive article, I think 2 weeks ago, that had reported on the amount of water entering the Great Lakes from Michigan rivers. And they specifically pointed out the Grand River, which I think through mid-July had already put more water into Lake Michigan than it would normally do in an entire year. In the summer, warmer temperatures dry out the land. More water is used by plants and crops, so less water makes its way into the tributaries. The increased temperatures also warm the water. This eventually leads to increased evaporation from the lakes in late summer and fall, which cause water levels to start their seasonal decline. And this cycle repeats itself annually, but the amount of rise in the rate of fall in water levels depend on how these natural factors vary each year. So this graph represents something Senator Stabenow mentioned earlier. If you take a close look at it, these are 3-year increments of precipitation going back to 1895. You can see the trend over time is up, and the trend the last the last 9 years, the last three-year segments has been off the charts regarding the precipitation of the Great Lakes. This plot that just popped up on the, oops, let me go back. I'm sorry, my slideshow took off on me. Let me go back here. Okay, the chart to the right shows the basically 100-year history in the ebb and flows of water levels, which really points out to like there is a cyclical nature to the Great Lakes where they go to lows and they go to highs over 20, 25-year periods. And again, as Senator Stabenow said, I think we've been warned or cautioned by scientists that with climate change, the extremes, the higher highs and lower lows that we'll be witnessing in the future, and that also points to planning for resiliency and planning for the future. The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence system respond to two factors. First is precipitation and runoff and evaporation. This is called the net basin supply. Second, by the flow of water out of each lake into the next downstream basin. The outflows from Lake Superior and Lake Ontario are regulated under IJC orders of approval. The IJC's Lake Superior Board is responsible for regulating outflows through the dam and hydropower plants located on the St. Mary's River, while the Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board is responsible for regulating outflows through the control structures on the St. Lawrence River. These were developed by the IJC and agreed to by both the Canadian and US governments. A partial control structure in the Niagara River also operates under an IJC order of approval. That structure controls water levels in a portion of the river just above the falls, but doesn't affect the outflow from Lake Erie. There are also no controls over the flows in Lake St. Clair River, and the Detroit River, and flows for those are determined primarily by the difference between the levels of Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and Lake Erie. So a significant factor influencing the lake levels is the limited ability of each of the connecting channels to pass water from each to the next. These rivers are very small compared to the vast size of each lake, so they constrict the flow of water. And the analogy we use is trying to empty a swimming pool with a straw. Though the St. Clair River is a major waterway, this view of the outlet of Lake Huron illustrates the point. And let's see, here we see the St. Lawrence River. The control point is the Moses-Sonder Dam, which is actually about 100 miles downstream from Lake Ontario. So that dam, basically at Cornwall, is what regulates somewhat the levels of Lake Ontario. This is one of those graphs that you might want to spend some time after today's meeting to dig into a little bit. There's a lot of information there, but this graph shows the net basin supplies to Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, which have a much greater and more variable effect on water levels than the outflows from each lake. As I mentioned earlier, net basin supply is the contribution from the local drainage basin. It's the sum of the precipitation and runoff less the evaporation from the surface area. So let's focus on Lake Michigan. Huron is shown in the bottom plot. The wide pink band shows the effect of net basin supplies on the level of Lake Michigan and Huron in a single month, based on historical records from 1900 to last year. The net basin supply has lowered the lake by as much as 4.7 inches in 1 month, when evaporation in the fall has been more than precipitation and runoff. The net basin supply alone has also raised the lake by as much as 12 inches in 1 month during a wet spring. The effect of the regulated flow from Lake Superior, shown here as the narrow dark pink band, varies over a much smaller range, raising Lake Michigan and Huron by 1 to 3 inches in 1 month. So to put it another way, the influence of precipitation, runoff, evaporation on lake levels is several times larger than the influence on levels from regulating Lake Superior outflows. Outflows from Lake Superior are regulated according to Plan 2012, which was implemented in 2015. Among the plan's guiding principles is that outflow settings work to balance water levels of Lake Superior with the water levels of Lake Michigan and Huron. For example, if one lake becomes relatively higher than the other, outflows will be adjusted in an attempt to bring the lakes into closer balance. The flow setting also considers certain limitations of the channel. If outflows from Lake Superior get too high, Sioux Harbor and Whitefish Island can flood. Conversely, low outflows affect fish spawning habitat, hydropower production, and commercial navigation, and it can expose shoals. High currents also impact ice flows in the winter, fish habitat, and navigation. So Plan 2012's balancing principle. The present outflow shows the balancing principle in action. Since Lake Michigan and Huron is significantly higher in its historical range than Lake Superior, the regulated outflow from Lake Superior is currently lower than it would be without regulation. Under the current water conditions, Plan 2012 also holds more water back in Lake Superior than the previous plan would if it were still in use. This is one of the important benefits of regulation, but as mentioned, the influence on lake levels is small compared to the influence of net basin supplies. So you're no doubt aware water levels are also influenced by diversions that flow into, out of, and between the Great Lakes. This influence is much smaller than the regulation of Lake Superior outflows. The Ogaki and Long Lac diversions into Lake Superior Basin combined with the Chicago diversion from Lake Michigan have, on average, increased the water level by less than 1 inch. The average net effect of these diversions has been to lower Lake Michigan and Huron by less than 1/4 of an inch. These changes represent the full effect of the diversions over time and not the amount that can be changed in 1 month. None of these diversions are operated, authorized, regulated, or controlled by the IJC. We examined the diversions during a study of the Great Lakes water levels that was completed in 1993. At that time, we found that the maximum theoretical effect of manipulating the Ogaki, Long Lake, and Chicago diversions would be to lower Lake Michigan and Huron by 3.5 inches after 2 years of operation. It was clear that changing the diversion rates would have impacts on the local watersheds. However, it wasn't clear whether the theoretical flow rates could be achieved or how extensive impacts inside and outside the Great Lakes Basin would be. The IJC recommended that the governments of Canada and the US determine these impacts before reaching conclusions about the diversions as a crisis relief measure. At this point, any steps to use the diversions as crisis relief measures, such as further study by the IJC, would need to be initiated by the two governments. I want to point out too that the IJC, because we're a creature of a treaty, we are plugged into our respective governments through the State Department and Canada's version of the State Department, the Global Affairs Canada. And I also want to point out that all of these orders for the Lake Superior Board, for the Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence Board, and the study that I just referenced are available on our website for the public's edification and use. The levels reference study recognized that regulating water levels can help alleviate coastal impacts, but that's a small part of the more comprehensive solution that is needed. The final report placed considerable emphasis on land use management as the most effective way to reduce damages to shoreline communities from flooding, erosion, and other coastal impacts. Our recommendations in 1993 that came out of the study were quite strong on this point. The IJC's final report recommended that governments aggressively promote land use management as the principal component of a strategy to reduce the impacts of fluctuating water levels. Other stakeholders must also adapt to become more resilient to fluctuating water levels. Design changes for recreational boating facilities, coastal roads, and wastewater treatment facilities will likely be required. Commercial navigation must cope with fast currents in portions of the system. And at some point, All interests, again, will face the challenges associated with low water levels. The IJC empathizes with the severe personal and financial impacts of homeowners, businesses, and municipalities enduring during these times of extraordinarily high water levels. And we recognize that becoming more resilient does not provide a short-term solution to the crisis at hand. But we know that over the long term, increasing resiliency is the most reliable solution. Led by federal, state, and provincial governments, it is vital that stakeholders in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence system respond to the present crisis by placing resiliency at the center of all planning, design, and construction decisions. We must also recognize that we stood at this crossroads during a time of high water levels nearly 35 years ago, and that we must act before the present sense of urgency subsides. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We'll wait for questions. If you can wait, you don't have to leave right away. We'll wait for all the questions. Again, people, if you can use your chat box.
I see one question there, Ron. Why is Lake Superior 8 inches above average high levels while Lake Michigan Huron is 33 inches above high water average? And what is the IJC and Lake Superior Control Board doing to level out the differences? Good question. So you can think of the orders that we have for Lake Superior or for Lake Ontario as a series of if-then decisions. Although it's not as simple as one if and one then that we would go to. There are multiple factors that play in that we have to balance. The most important factor right now, why Lake Michigan and Lake Huron is so much higher than Lake Superior, isn't necessarily water flowing from Lake Superior. It's the precipitation in the Lake Michigan Huron basin that's flowing in through the rivers and has been for the last 3 years. At current time, we've been deviating at Lake Superior, which has helped. It's a marginal help, and we recognize that. There's very little we can do to impact the level of Lakes Michigan and Huron by manipulating the dams at the St. Mary's River. And I'll provide Ron a more detailed type of answer for that. I know I have it in my files because I check in with our engineers all the time on it. But there's at different times of the year there's environmental issues because of spawning habitat in the St. Mary's River. We had a couple times this past year where we had to close gates for maintenance at the power plants, which is both an energy production issue and a safety issue. So there's all these different factors that play in. Primarily the reason Lake Michigan Huron is so much higher relative to Lake Superior right now is the precipitation in the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron basin.
If you have questions, add at the chat room all your questions down here, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. We now are lucky enough to have Kim Lasada on board and with us. So let me have Ron Watson do the presentation and welcome her into.
Can you hear me okay, Ron?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I first met Kim about a year and a half ago when she agreed to come to a meeting that was set up by the New Buffalo Township Supervisor, Michelle Height, to hear a short presentation from the New Buffalo Shoreline Alliance to understand the problems we're having with the erosion south of the harbor. After and during the presentation, it was clear to me that Kim and her staff were quite familiar with problems of erosion and high water, and they asked some good probing questions. At the end of the presentation, Kim said, I know it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, but I'd like to see the problem. Can you show it to me? So she said, why don't we take a boat ride? And we took a boat ride out in the harbor, and she got to see the devastating impact of the erosion south of the harbor. She got to see all of the stone revetments that were being installed. And in a matter of minutes, she said, I see the problem. What can I do to help? And ever since then, she's been an advocate for us and for the entire folks who live along the shoreline in southwestern Michigan. She spearheaded a number of things that she's going to talk about. So I won't say much more about that, but with that, I'd like to introduce Kim Lasada, the Michigan State Senator from the 21st District of Michigan. Go ahead, Kim. Thank you for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
We're having some technical difficulties. Okay, Kim, go ahead and speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, good morning, and thank you, Ron Watson, for inviting me to speak today. I'm Senator Kim Lasada, and I represent Michigan's 21st Senate District, which includes Berrien, Cass, and St. Joseph counties in southwest lower Michigan, along the Indiana-Michigan border. I grew up in Berrien County and lived there with my husband and 4 children. Before being elected in the Senate in 2018, I served 1 term in the Michigan House of Representatives, and I was a 5th grade teacher, which was a job that was a fantastic job. I loved being a teacher. I would go back to teaching tomorrow. But I want to provide you with my contact information right now, and then again at the end of the meeting. So please feel free to reach out to my office if you'd like to share your thoughts, or if you have questions about my bill or matters that are not answered during this meeting today. So my contact information is, my email is senate@senate.michigan.gov. Phone is 517-373-6960. And the website is statesenatorkimlasada.com. So it's an honor to be here to provide you with a legislative update on issues important to you. Each of you have invested in property and homes along the Great Lakes shoreline, and too many of you are dealing with the serious effects of high water and erosion. Shoreline erosion has been an issue in southwest Michigan for some time. Even before the recent record high lake levels, public and private properties were and continue to be threatened by harbor structures, blocking sand from following natural littoral drift. Add to it the elimination of federally sponsored beach nourishment in the 1990s. And we have a very serious problem in some of our lakeshore communities. Right now, I had a hard time connecting. I was in a cabin, a log cabin built by Indians. I'm on the, just looking out at the Mackinac Straits, which is beautiful. And the cabin is my mother-in-law's family cabin. They came up here and bought the cabin when she was a little girl. When she graduated from high school, she came out for the summer and watched as the workers were building the Mackinac Bridge. So I've seen the lake levels not only in my district but up here in the UP, and the water is Yeah, very close right now. And over the past few years, I've joined leaders in New Buffalo and St. Joseph on several different tours to see the erosion that's affecting communities along Lake Michigan's coast. In general, beach erosion caused by rising water levels has washed away yards of beachfront over the past 2 decades and has now reached a point of seriously threatening homes and infrastructure. And it's amazing to me, I've heard of one individual in Stevensville in my district that the homeowners tore their home down rather than having it go over the bluff because it's more costly to clean it up after it's gone over. I just can't imagine just tearing your home down, instead of it falling over. Just to be in that situation is just devastating, I'm sure. Last December, members of the Michigan Senate and House of Representatives sent letters to the governor, Governor Whitmer, asking her to declare a state of emergency for shoreline erosion. We had seen the devastation, the high water levels, and major storms that were causing what they were causing, and we knew the situation could worsen for many homeowners. The governor's administration responded that an emergency declaration was not needed yet. Still, legislators know this issue is real. We hear from constituents and homeowners often. It is not going away, and we pray it doesn't get any worse before it gets better. To help homeowners and local governments protect their property from the extraordinary erosion of our shorelines, several bills have been proposed in the Michigan legislature. I'll just tell you of some of the bills. And if you want more information, maybe you already have information on these, but if you want more information, just, contact me. So House Bill 5309 and 5310. What those do, in an event of a state of emergency, if one is declared, Rep. Jim Lilly introduced a plan that would allow residents to immediately begin work on protecting their property without having to obtain an individual permit. And I'm sure you're aware of that now. The plan also would ensure a homeowner's property taxes would not increase, which is very important. They wouldn't increase based on those improvements, as it would be considered maintenance and not improvement. Damage has already occurred up and down the Lake Michigan shoreline. This proposal would speed up the permitting process and to prevent more harm. House Bill 5309 and 5310 have been referred to the Regulatory Reform Committee and Tax Policy Committee, respectively. House Bill 5556, another bill that would help homeowners living along the Great Lakes shoreline facing soil erosion, sponsored by Representative Brad Slaw. House Bill 5556 will enhance the shoreline minor permit process by including sandbags. While a minor project permit for sandbagging currently exists, it was created administratively and not in statute. This means the department could eliminate it as quickly as they created it. This measure will make the minor permit for sandbags permanent, and it will save homeowners money and time and will enable bottom sand in very specific amounts to be used to fill sandbags rather than to have sand, to bring in sand or other materials into the lakeshore. Given the high water levels, we need to be focused on easing the regulatory burden while maintaining our environmental focus. House Bill 5556 has been referred to the House Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreations Committee for consideration. Okay, Senate Bill 1020 is a new bill. It was introduced last month, and it would specify in law that a permit is not needed for certain work above the ordinary high water mark. It's sponsored by Senator Ed McBroom, who is from the UP, and it would amend existing law to specifically allow dredging, placing sand or soil and constructing seawalls and other shoreline stabilization structures to be done without a permit required by Eagle if the work is located above the ordinary high water mark. This bill was referred to the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality. If passed, it is unclear if the governor will be supportive of this measure. Senate Bill 714, you may be familiar with legislation introduced in the Senate to help expedite homeowners' applications for erosion control structures. Eagle has been expediting permits on a case-by-case basis before Senate Bill 714 was introduced, but afterwards expanded their efforts. Senate Bill 714, sponsored by Roger Victory, which you had been speaking about, would amend Part 323 and Part 325 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act to expedite the permit process and clear up issues property owners are experiencing when seeking approval for erosion control structures. That passed the Senate and it's pending before the House Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Committee. And Senator Victory is working with Eagle to identify a path forward. Once session resumes, we've been back in session this summer. We're just waiting to get back again now because one of the senators, as you may or may not know, tested positive for COVID. So I'm just waiting, for the call to get back. I'm ready to get back to work. We've got a lot to do. So hopefully this bill will get through in the House when we get back. Senate Bill 974. Hard structures are effective solutions to mitigate erosion, and we've seen a lot of that now. But some have highlighted that Michigan's coast is becoming armored with seawalls. Others fear tourists think there isn't any beach left, and Michigan could lose serious tourism dollars. We must find a way to protect and replenish our properties and beaches in the long term. And it must be a solution that we can see through. Property owners and local governments I've met with have been searching for new solutions to erosion mitigation. However, they have said without clear processes from Eagle, they are reluctant to proceed with anything new. In February, I hosted a meeting with local leaders, Eagle, and erosion mitigation experts to tackle this issue. I explained that the need and desire to protect and replenish natural shorelines are strong. Eagle has been willing to work with us to determine a defined process for soft shore solutions to shoreline erosion. The result of these conversations is my bill, Senate Bill 974. It will establish an official process to save our beaches, homes, and infrastructure before it's too late. Senate 974 would help establish a permit and regulatory process for beach nourishment at state parks, state recreation areas, residential property locations, and recreation areas owned by municipalities along Great Lake shorelines experiencing heavy erosion. According to the Army Corps of Engineers, beach nourishment describes the practice of adding sand onto or directly adjacent to an eroding beach, providing a soft structural response, allowing sand to shift and move with waves and currents. The bill also would require Eagle to inspect potential sites where sand would be extracted and deposited to consider public health, safety, welfare, and environmental risk before issuing or denying a permit application. Each site is unique. It is one of the things that makes Michigan a great state to live, work, and play, and we need to take that into account. Feedback I've received suggests Senate Bill 974 would help put the pieces of the puzzle together by establishing an official permitting process that will satisfy both Eagle and homeowners and local governments to pursue beach nourishment projects. We need new ideas and new opportunities to protect properties. Well, this is not a one-size-fits-all. My bill would provide another tool in the toolbox. Senate Bill 974 was referred to the Senate Natural Resources Committee. While we await a hearing, I'm continuing to work to improve this bill based on input I've received from those informed about the issue. For example, we're looking at how this proposal interacts with Part 325 to see if changes are needed to ensure there isn't any disruption to current replenishment activities. My goal is to craft clear, sensible policy to restore and protect homes, beaches, and infrastructures. And while I'm in the UP, I will be visiting the 3 state schools up here, and one of those is Michigan Tech. And I've been working with Dr. Meadows on this bill. He's very familiar with it, and I'm going to touch base with him and see if he has any other ideas going forward. So with regard to appropriation, we know there's an immense cost to erect seawalls, and ongoing maintenance adds up. That's why I did support a state-funded grant program for high water infrastructure repair earlier this year, before we knew the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on our state revenues. The legislature and the governor came to an agreement to provide $5 million for competitive grants to counties, cities, villages, and townships for public infrastructure damage or prevention methods due to high water shoreline erosion. Grants to a single community were not to exceed $250,000 and would have required a 25% match from the locals. I supported this plan in the budget, which was expected to be signed by the governor. Unfortunately, the timing of the bill had to be vetoed because, as you know, we're looking at a deficit for the current budget and going into 2021. So now that we're facing a serious budget deficit, we're going to know more of the severity on August 24th, and I'm looking forward to that. We're going to be hearing, listening to another consensus revenue estimating conference. So should additional funds become available in the future, I would definitely consider supporting programs like this to protect and preserve Michigan's water infrastructure and world famous shoreline. And I hope the governor would again too. So thanks for inviting me to speak. Many of my colleagues and I remain committed to helping homeowners facing devastating damage from high water levels and back measures to provide relief. So let me give you my contact information again. Sen K. Lasada at senate.michigan.gov. Phone number 517-373-6960. Website is statesenatorkimlasada.com. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim, very much for that presentation. Do we have any questions at this point in time for our speakers?
There is one there, Ron.
Okay.
It says, would the Eagle allow clean dredged spoils to aid in beach nourishment process like recommended by ABSCA?
Kim?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So that was the issue too. I saw pictures of sand that had moved from the beaches in New Buffalo out further. And so looking at those pictures, my thought was, okay, that sand was located on the beach. It was located closer to shore. Why can't that sand just be moved up? It seems like a no-brainer. Eagle had said that, you know, there could be aquatic life, you know, there. And, but Eagle is definitely willing to work on looking at that sand, for example, and seeing if it can be moved up onto the shoreline or closer to the shoreline to allow for a natural barrier to the waves. So yes, they're willing to work with us at looking at that sand. For me, you know, I'm not an expert on this. And for me, I thought, why would we be dredging the river instead of just getting the sand that moved out so far that it doesn't come in naturally?
Okay,
So yes, they're willing to work with us.
great. Rob, could you describe the actions the Moses Saunders Control Board was able to do this winter to help lower Lake Ontario and thus all the other lakes?
Sure. And one thing to bear in mind that Lake Ontario levels have really no impact on the upper Great Lakes because Niagara Falls, as long as Niagara Falls is still flowing to the east, any control on Lake Ontario doesn't impact the upper Great Lakes. But the question is, yeah, the Moses Saunders Dam is controlled by an order called Plan 2014 that was implemented at the end of 2018, I guess. And essentially, up until about 2 months ago, the Board of Control there deviated from the plan to let as much water out as possible, given all the other concerns. So they were letting a lot more water out. I'm just, don't hold me to this, I think it was about 200 cubic meters per second more than what the plan actually called for. Now that the Lake Ontario is approaching its long-term average, they're no longer deviating and they're back using Plan 2014 to manage the outflows from the Moses Saunders Dam. You know, a couple of interesting things are last summer, all 6 commissioners on the IJC were brand new in May of 2019. That's the first time all 6 have been new since the treaty was formed in 1909. We hit the ground running because of the crisis on Lake Ontario, and we were examining ways to get more water off Lake Ontario. And one of the things we were talking about was raising the outflows so much it would stop maritime traffic on the St. Lawrence Seaway and through Lake Ontario. And I mean, we heard from Minnesota's governor and senators and lawmakers and chambers of commerce that no, you can't stop that. That's so important to the economy and commerce of the Great Lakes state. So that's one of the considerations we have is how much water can we let out, yet let maritime traffic operate safely to benefit all the people in the basin. So the short answer is they use their deviation authority to let more water out. Now that the lake level is getting back to its long-term average, the deviation is no longer in action.
Okay. Folks, are there any other questions? Ron, do you have any? Okay, you can
Nope.
please type in any of your questions in the chat room. You know, on your file options, your little red arrow at the top of the page, you click on that. If you have it collapsed, open it up and you'll see the chat room right here. Okay, hearing none, I want to thank our speakers today, Rob and Senator Lasada and Senator Stabenow. Thank you very much for your presentations and willingness to come out or be on our webinar this morning on a busy, wonderful Saturday morning.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody, for the work and advocacy you do on behalf of the Great Lakes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be sending out the handouts. I have Rob Sisson's slides and then the report on the Great Lakes Parks high water levels. We'll send that off to all the attendees and all the people who wanted to attend and signed up to attend. Okay. On behalf of the Great Lakes Coalition, I welcome all of you and thank you for attending, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Don't forget to increase your dues or make major contributions, because to do some of the stuff we're doing, we will be needing support. Thank you.